Rise of the European Emperor by Taishan Laonyo.
Chapter 441, Interception. Marin had enough face. After receiving Marin's letter, Hamburg Grand Speaker Heisenberg immediately approved Marin's request to borrow 100 ships for troop transport. Most of these ships have a displacement of about 200 tons, which is just right for the Elbe-Lübeck Canal. If it is bigger, it will be difficult to pass. After all, the Duchy of Saxe-Lauenburg does not have the strength to dig a larger canal. Even most of the money for digging this canal was borrowed from Lübeck and Hamburg. Moreover, in order to keep it secret and avoid being known by the spies sent to Hamburg by the Bosse coalition, Heisenberg's statement to the outside world was that these 100 ships assisted the Swedish army in attacking the Danish capital Copenhagen. Moreover, for fear that the other party's spies would not believe it, this statement was still half hidden. In this way, it is more convincing. Because if you announce it directly, the other party's spies may doubt its authenticity. And such a half-hidden, accidental leak makes it easier for the enemy to believe it. Afterwards, Heisenberg and the Hamburg Parliament also adopted Marin's suggestion, promulgated the wartime regulations, and declared a curfew in Hamburg. If anyone is out at night, they will be arrested as spies. At the same time, anyone who rides out of the city must obtain the approval of the Hamburg sheriff to prevent spies from riding horses to inform the enemy. In other words, the owners of the horses in Hamburg can no longer ride out of the city easily, and must obtain the approval of the sheriff. This move is too cruel. The several Saxon spies who sneaked into Hamburg are now frowning. Even if they find out any news, they can't ride out of the city to inform the camp. If they knew this earlier, they would hide the horses outside the city. Unfortunately, they knew it too late. In fact, the people of Hamburg are also very nervous now. They know that the victory or defeat in Lübeck is related to the life and death of Hamburg. If the armies of Lübeck and Marin are defeated, Hamburg will not be able to escape. For this reason, some wealthy businessmen have begun to secretly transfer their property. Because if the Bosse coalition breaks through Lübeck, the next target will definitely be Hamburg. If Hamburg fell, their property would certainly not be saved. Therefore, many wealthy businessmen began to transfer their property privately. Of course, the Hamburg Parliament absolutely prohibited this behavior. Therefore, those wealthy businessmen could only quietly transfer some gold and silver that were easier to carry. Other materials could not be transported for the time being. Moreover, there were only 4,000 defenders in Hamburg, and the strength was very weak. Although the Bosse coalition had not come to besiege Hamburg, Hamburg could not hire mercenaries now. Now these 4,000 troops still had contracts before. Why? After hearing that the Bosse coalition had 50,000 troops and 20,000 were Swiss mercenaries, many mercenary groups were directly scared and retreated. Even if Hamburg was willing to hire at a high price, those German mercenaries would not come. Because, in their opinion, this was a battle that was bound to be lost. Although the mercenaries were passionate and brave, they were not fools. Facing a powerful enemy army of 50,000, no one was willing to come to die without signing a contract before. Therefore, even if Hamburg had money now, it could not hire mercenaries willing to help them fight. After all, the German mercenaries had not defeated the Swiss mercenaries in this era. Psychologically, the German mercenaries were still a little afraid of the popular Swiss mercenaries at this stage. It was heard that the Bosse coalition had 20,000 Swiss mercenaries, as well as a large number of Saxon knights and Brandenburg knights. Many mercenary group leaders were so scared that they dared not come no matter how much money they were given. Therefore, the people of Hamburg at this time were very desperate. When they learned that Marin not only had 18,000 troops to support the Lübeck battlefield, but also defeated the 20,000 Danish troops in the north. Suddenly, the Hamburg Parliament was like a chicken blood, and felt that they saw hope again. Therefore, the Hamburg Parliament unanimously passed Marin's request to borrow a ship in a very short time. Then the curfew and so on were also passed unanimously. These Hamburg parliamentarians are all smart people. They know the ambition of the Saxons to replace Lübeck and Hamburg. If the city of Hamburg is broken by the Bosse coalition, these parliamentarians will lose everything, including property and status. Therefore, they all eagerly hope that Marin can defeat the Bosse coalition. Only in this way can they keep their wealthy status. Otherwise, they will be robbed of their wealth by the enemy, and they may even be killed. Lübeck and Hamburg are not far apart, so Marin received a reply from the Hamburg Parliament that night. Therefore, Marin now began to consider how to prepare to welcome the 18,000 reinforcements. After thinking about it, Marin believed that the most important thing at this time was to eliminate the scouts of the Bosse coalition along the Elbe River and the Elbe-Lübeck Canal. Because once the troop transport arrives, if the enemy scouts who report the news are not intercepted, the consequences will be very serious. Even if there is a fish that slips through the net, the secret of the arrival of the reinforcements will be revealed to the Bassa coalition. As long as the 50,000 Bassa coalition forces are prepared for encirclement in advance, these 18,000 reinforcements may have difficulty in joining Marin's main force, let alone a sneak attack on the Bassa coalition forces. Therefore, Marin decided to send out all the 200 elite interception scout cavalry brought by Saul, and be ready to intercept any horsemen along the Elbe River and the Elbe-Lübeck Canal heading towards the Bassa coalition camp, regardless of whether he was innocent or not. It is better to kill by mistake than to miss one. Of course, the ship sent by Hamburg has just set off, and it will take a few days to transport the 18,000 troops of Wolf Esperand and Saqqara. Therefore, in these few days, Marin cannot send troops to intercept the Bassa coalition scouts in advance. Why? Because if Marin starts to intercept the Bassa coalition scouts in this direction a few days in advance, it will attract the attention of the resourceful Elector Frederick III of Saxony. If he sends more people to pay attention to the west, the 200 scout cavalry under Saul who are specially used to intercept messengers will not be enough to intercept the enemy messengers. As long as one runs away, it will cause a disaster. After all, the Elbe-Lübeck Canal is not wide, and the limit for wooden boats of 1 or 200 tons is already limited. If Frederick III, the Elector of Saxony, sent people to sink a few ships in the canal, just like the shipwreck in the Suez Canal during World War II, the canal would be cut off before the sunken ships were salvaged. By then, the fleet would not be able to reach the city of Lübeck and join Marin, let alone a sneak attack. So, when deciding to release the 200 interception-type reconnaissance cavalry, Marin made a decision. He decided to send these 200 people to cross the river in a small boat overnight, and then go north to intercept and kill the Bassa coalition scouts in the north. The reason for making this decision was actually that Marin deliberately confused the enemy. If Marin sent people to intercept and kill the Bassa coalition scouts, then Frederick III would judge that the other party was keeping it secret and preventing his scouts from obtaining useful intelligence. Even further inferences would be made that the enemy would definitely take the main route in the north. After all, Europeans still don't know what making a feint to the east and attacking in the west means. These tactics are not popular in Europe at present. Even a smart person like Juga Terra has never seen such means. Of course, Marin will also send some scouts to abandon riding horses. Riding horses is too ostentatious, and it is obvious to tell others that you are a spy, and walk to both sides of the Elbe-Lübeck Canal to scout all the roads. As long as all the roads leading to the Bassa coalition camp on both sides of the Elbe-Lübeck Canal are figured out, when the fleet transporting reinforcements really arrives, 200 interception-type reconnaissance cavalry will come over and directly guard every intersection leading to the Bassa coalition camp according to the instructions of these people. Anyone who is found riding a horse to the east will be shot and killed directly, and no one will be spared. In this way, the whereabouts of the reinforcements can be fully protected. Chapter 442, The enemy is going to attack Hamburg. Ideals are full, but reality is very skinny. Nothing is easy to do. Unless someone is so lucky that everything goes smoothly. At this time, in the camp of the Bassa coalition, Frederick III and Joachim I were in a bad mood, and the two of them drank together. After Marin sent someone to ask Wolf Esperand to forge a letter, Wolf Esperand quickly executed the order and sent a subordinate with superb writing skills, dressed as a messenger, and set off with a forged letter. Because he was dressed like a messenger and walked on the main road, it was difficult not to attract the attention of the Bassa coalition scouts. Sure enough, the fake messenger was chased and killed by 7 or 8 scouts of the Bassa coalition. In a panic, the fake messenger deliberately dropped the secret letter on the ground. The fake messenger's horse was too fast, and it was impossible to catch up. The scouts of the Bassa coalition picked up the parchment secret letter that fell on the ground, brought it back to the camp, and handed it to Frederick III and Joachim I. The two were shocked after reading the secret letter. They did not expect that the army of the Duchy of Schleswig not only withstood the attack of the 20,000 Danish troops, but also could draw out half of the veterans and half of the new soldiers to form a 10,000-strong army to reinforce the south. So, the two of them drank wine in a depressed mood. This Christian is incompetent. He has twice the number of troops as the enemy, but not only can he not defeat the Duchy of Schleswig, but he also let the enemy split half of its main force to go south. Joachim I despised his brother-in-law with dissatisfaction. Frederick III did not despise his nephew, but helped to say something. Our army is 2.5 times that of Marin, but we still failed to take Lübeck. Joachim I was speechless, but he still argued, it's different. Lübeck is a strange city. It is surrounded by water and is really difficult to attack. We can only attack the southeast part of the wall. Although Marin has fewer people than us, we only need to defend the southeast part of the wall, so the pressure is relatively small. Therefore, we can't succeed for the time being. Frederick III nodded. What Joachim I said was indeed true. Although the city of Lübeck is not small, it is located in the middle of the Trave River and built on a large sandbar in the middle of the river. Saxony and Brandenburg are both landlocked countries and are landlubbers. Naturally, they are helpless with the Lübeck people and Marin's army shrinking in the city. Even though the Bosse coalition filled up many narrow river sections in the southeast and northeast of Lübeck, there were still too few areas that could be used for siege. The Bosse coalition had an advantage of 50,000 troops, but the wall that could be attacked was too short, and the advantage of troops could not be brought into play. On the contrary, although Marin's army had few people, it was still easy to defend the narrower wall section. What's more, they also had matchlock guns that were very suitable for defense. Speaking of matchlock guns, even Frederick III, who was known as the Little Juga of Germany, had no way to deal with it. If a fierce battle was fought on the plain, the side without guns could take the lead in launching an attack, or even launch a general attack from multiple directions, and make full use of the superior forces. As long as the two sides came into contact, the muskets would become useless fire sticks. However, the musketeers on the top of the city were different. The attacking side could not let the soldiers rush to the musketeers as quickly as they charged on the flat ground, and could only slowly climb up the city with the siege ladder. During this time, the musketeers had already finished reloading and shot down the people climbing the ladder. Moreover, it was difficult to block the bullets of the musket. Even if you were wearing armor, you could be knocked off the ladder by the musket. What's more, Frederick III had realized in the past few days that even if more time was spent, the river channels around the city of Lübeck could not be filled up. At least, it would be difficult for the Bosse coalition to fill up the river channels around the city of Lübeck in a short period of time. How about we use the army to besiege the 10,000 Schleswig reinforcements outside the city and force Marin to send troops out of the city to rescue? Joachim I suddenly had a bright idea and suggested. Marin's 20,000 troops were hiding in the city of Lübeck, and the Bosse coalition had no way to deal with them. There were 50,000 troops, but they were staring at them across the river and the city wall. If they can be lured out of Lübeck, it will be easier to fight. At the beginning, Frederick III and Joachim I planned to surround Lübeck by surprise before Marin could react and take it down by surprise. Then, when besieging Hamburg, they would wait for Marin's army and annihilate it outside the city. However, no one knew how the news was leaked. Before the Bosse coalition arrived at the battlefield, Marin actually got the news in advance and stationed 20,000 people in Lübeck. In this way, the Bosse coalition had 50,000 troops, but they had no way to deal with Lübeck. Hearing Joachim I's proposal, Frederick III shook his head and said, "Joachim, this method is not feasible. You know, only 5,000 of the support troops are regular troops, and the other half are recruits. Although the army is rare, these soldiers, no matter how precious they are not as precious as Lübeck, and not as precious as Marin's own life. So, I think that even if we surround the 10,000 people, for various reasons, the cunning boy Marin may abandon the 10,000 troops. After all, nothing is more important than the safety of Lübeck and the safety of Marin himself and his main force. After all, even if he wants to save the 10,000 people, he may not be able to save them, and he may even sacrifice his main force." Joachim I thought about it, nodded, and approved of Frederick III's opinion. After all, although 5,000 veterans are precious, they are not as precious as Lübeck, nor are they as important as Marin's own life and 20,000 main forces. As for the other 5,000 recruits and civilians, Joachim I didn't feel bad even if they were lost. At worst, he could just recruit them again, or even force them. But Joachim I was still unwilling to give up. He asked unwillingly, "What should we do? Lübeck is so difficult to fight, should we give up?" "Give up? How is that possible? Wait. Give up. Give up." After Frederick III repeated "give up" several times, his eyes suddenly lit up. "Huh, I have a solution." Frederick III laughed happily. "What solution?" Joachim I asked anxiously. "We won't fight Lübeck anymore," Frederick III said confidently. "What? Not attacking Lübeck? How can that be? Marin, that little fox, is in Lübeck. If we don't attack Lübeck and let Marin go, there will be endless troubles. This time, we joined forces to send troops. In addition to looting the two cities, half of the reason is to destroy that kid's army. In this way, it will be easier to divide his land." Joachim I was anxious. "I didn't say to let Marin, that little fox, go. I just said that we won't attack Lübeck for the time being." "What do you mean?" My plan is to move the army westward and make a gesture of attacking Hamburg. It is said that there are only 3,000 or 4,000 defenders in Hamburg, and their combat effectiveness is not as strong as Marin's army. Are we afraid that we can't take Hamburg if we surround it with 50,000 troops? Joachim I thought about it and nodded. It is indeed a good idea. The opponent's main force has gathered in Lübeck. At this time, it is indeed easier to attack Hamburg. Moreover, there is a lot of wealth in Hamburg. No, Joachim, I'm not really going to attack Hamburg, but I'm making this gesture. The ultimate goal is to lure that kid Marin out of the city to have a decisive battle with us. Marin might grit his teeth and give up the 15,000 main force reinforcements, but it would be difficult for Marin to give up Hamburg. Once given up, their alliance will lose a powerful ally, which is a huge loss. This is not like mercenaries, who can be recruited again if they are gone. It is very difficult to rebuild a city if it is destroyed. Do you mean to lure that little fox Marin out of the city to fight? Will that kid be fooled? Joachim I said worriedly. It's best to be fooled, but even if you're not fooled, it's okay. Once we take Hamburg, we can get a huge amount of wealth. After dividing up the wealth, our army can still return to the city of Lübeck to continue the siege. Anyway, no matter what, we will win. It's best if Marin leaves the city, so we can take the opportunity to destroy his main force. Then, Lübeck and Hamburg will lose their last support and will eventually be captured by us. If we don't leave the city, we will eat Hamburg first, and then go back to slowly besiege Lübeck. Frederick III said with shining eyes. Joachim I nodded repeatedly after hearing this. Indeed, this method was very clever. Whether Marin and his 20,000 main forces leave the city or not, it seems that the Bossa coalition will not suffer any loss and will win. Next, under the command of Frederick III and Joachim I, the coalition camp stationed in the southeast of Lübeck began to move. Marin saw through the telescope that many soldiers of the Bossa coalition were dismantling their tents. What are they going to do? Are they going to withdraw? Marin fell into thought. The next day, when Marin saw a group of carts loaded with dismantled tents of the Bossa coalition passing the south of Lübeck and heading southeast, Marin's face suddenly changed. Not good, the enemy is going to attack Hamburg. Then, Marin hurriedly came down from the top of the city and went to discuss countermeasures with Lübeck Grand Speaker Tagfact and others. What? You mean, the Bossa coalition is going to attack Hamburg? Tagfact and others were also shocked after hearing Marin's statement. Why are they going to attack Hamburg? Tagfact said in doubt. Obviously, Lübeck has my 20,000 troops, and Lübeck is surrounded by water, so it is difficult to attack by force, and they can't attack it. So, they gave up and decided to attack Hamburg first. Marin said depressedly. But Hamburg is also surrounded by water, and it is difficult to attack. Said Lübeck Councillor Schott. In the early years, Hamburg, like Lübeck, was also located on a sandbar in the middle of a river. Lübeck is located on a sandbar in the middle of the Trave River. The old city of Hamburg is located on a sandbar in the middle of the Elbe River. Marin waved his hand and said, that's different. Lübeck has my 20,000 troops stationed there. The 50,000 troops of the Bossa coalition want to attack the city, which does not have much advantage. In Hamburg, there are only 3,000 or 4,000 mercenaries with average combat effectiveness at this time. Facing the powerful 50,000 Bossa coalition, it is impossible to defend. What should I do then? Tagfact said anxiously. You know, Lübeck and Hamburg have always been traditional allies, although there is competition between them. But when encountering major events, they still support each other. If Hamburg is gone, Lübeck will be alone. Why are Lübeck and Hamburg considered the two strongest cities in the Hanseatic League? However, they are just cities after all. Although they are rich, their strength is limited. Therefore, the two cities also support each other for survival. Moreover, both cities are located in the Principality of Holstein and have been oppressed by Denmark. At the same time, the Hanseatic League and Denmark are also competitors in maritime trade. Therefore, in order to fight against Denmark's oppression, the two cities have long formed an alliance and helped each other. However, if Hamburg is finished, Lübeck's self-protection ability will be greatly weakened. Apart from anything else, it would be very difficult for Lübeck alone to suppress Denmark and prevent the Danish navy from reviving. After all, Denmark is very large, and the Lübeck navy can monitor the waters near the Danish capital Copenhagen and Zealand Island, but cannot monitor the Jutland Peninsula and Norway. Therefore, Lübeck needs Hamburg's military cooperation. In addition, because of the existence of the Elbe-Lübeck Canal, many of the large quantities of fur, wood, plant ash, beeswax, metals and other bulk commodities purchased by Lübeck from Eastern Europe are also handed over to Hamburg merchants and sold to the North Sea coast and even the Rhine region. After all, Lübeck's sphere of influence is mainly in the Baltic Sea region and northeastern Germany. Hamburg is the commercial overlord of the North Sea region and Lübeck's most important trading partner. If Hamburg is defeated, even if Lübeck survives, it will suffer a huge blow in the future. After all, the North Sea region and Western Germany are not Lübeck's sphere of influence. Lübeck alone can't do it. Although Marin is also a newly promoted powerful prince, the nature of Lübeck and Marin's East Frisia is different. Marin is a warlord prince after all, while Lübeck and Hamburg are both commercial cities. Therefore, Lübeck trusts Hamburg, which is also a free commercial city, more than a big warlord prince like Marin. In the eyes of the people of Lübeck, it is the right way to keep warm with commercial cities like Hamburg. If you cooperate with a military strongman like Marin, you might be swallowed up. Therefore, the people of Lübeck absolutely do not want to see Hamburg defeated. After all, Lübeck and Hamburg together can still be equal when they form an alliance with Marin. However, if Hamburg is finished, and only Lübeck is left, and it forms an alliance with Marin, Lübeck can only be a younger brother. What? You mean other Hanseatic cities? They don't even have fleets, and many of them are land-based commercial cities, which are of no help to Lübeck. Moreover, the scale of business is small. They are only worthy of being Lübeck's younger brothers, not Lübeck's allies. Therefore, Speaker Tagfact and others began to discuss the issue of rescuing Hamburg with Marin, hoping that Marin could send troops to rescue Hamburg, so as not to lose an important ally. Chapter 443 Explanation. When Grand Speaker Tagfact and other Lübeck members finished their internal meeting and came to Marin to ask him to send troops, Marin did not agree immediately. Why? Because it was too dangerous. Moreover, Marin felt that this should be the opponent's strategy. So he said to Grand Speaker Tagfact, Mr. Speaker, it's not that I don't want to send troops to rescue Hamburg. But I suspect this is a trap. Trap? Grand Speaker Tagfact was a little confused. He was just an experienced politician, but he was not very proficient in military affairs and did not see the danger of this matter. Yes, a trap. I suspect that the enemy's attack on Hamburg this time is not really intended, but to lead my 20,000 troops out of the city to achieve the goal of a head-on decisive battle. Marin said very seriously. What do you mean? Mr. Speaker should know that Lübeck is surrounded by water, which is easy to defend but difficult to attack. Although the enemy has 50,000 main combat troops, they have no idea how to deal with the city of Lübeck surrounded by water. In addition, my 20,000 troops are all elite soldiers, and they also have muskets that are very useful for defending the city. It is almost impossible for the enemy to capture the city of Lübeck. Speaker Tagfact nodded, agreeing with Marin's words. The ruggedness of Lübeck has always been the pride of the people of Lübeck. Lübeck and Hamburg are both super commercial cities in Germany with great wealth. If the city defense is weak, it would have been broken and robbed by those jealous princes. It is precisely because the two cities of Lübeck and Hamburg are built on the sandbars in the middle of the river, which are easy to defend and difficult to attack, that these two extremely wealthy cities have prospered for hundreds of years. Ordinary nobles, even with tens of thousands of troops, cannot capture the city of Lübeck. After all, there are normally more than 3,000 defenders in the city. It is difficult to capture Lübeck without 20,000 or 30,000 people. It was only because there were too many soldiers in the Bosse coalition this time, with a total of 50,000 troops, and they were all elite soldiers, that Lübeck could not hold on. If it weren't for Marin's 20,000 elite soldiers, the people of Lübeck would not have the confidence to resist the 50,000 elite soldiers of the Bosse coalition. Marin continued, Lübeck has my 20,000 elite soldiers and more than 3,000 of its own, so it is naturally impregnable. However, Hamburg is different. Hamburg only has 3,000 to 4,000 defenders. According to the report of his men, those German mercenaries seem to be frightened by the Swiss and refuse to accept Hamburg's employment. Therefore, even if Hamburg is not besieged now, there are no new mercenaries willing to help Hamburg fight against the Bosse coalition. After all, there have been too few battles in the past few decades in which 50,000 elite soldiers have been deployed. Speaker Tagfact was silent. He also knew very well that if Hamburg could not recruit mercenaries to help, how could Lübeck find them? Except for Marin, the ally, it is impossible for others to fight against the 50,000 elite soldiers of the Bosse coalition for Lübeck and Hamburg. As for Sweden, which is also an ally, they do have tens of thousands of troops. However, Sweden is not doing well either. Since they fell out with the Grand Duchy of Moscow last time, they need to station thousands of troops on the eastern border to guard against the attack of the Grand Duchy of Moscow. After all, the Grand Duchy of Moscow is also a powerful country. It usually has 20,000 to 30,000 standing troops, and can mobilize 200,000 troops in wartime. Although most of them are peasants who make up the numbers, this situation can also scare people. Therefore, Sweden can't withdraw enough troops to support Lübeck and Hamburg. Moreover, even if all the more than 10,000 Swedish troops come, they may not be able to beat the 50,000 Bassa coalition forces. Therefore, Marin's 20,000 main forces are basically Lübeck's only hope. Although the people of Lübeck also hope to swallow up all the benefits of Hamburg. However, at this moment, if Hamburg is broken by the Bassa coalition, the benefits will definitely belong to Brandenburg and Saxony, and have nothing to do with Lübeck at all. Moreover, Lübeck will lack a strong reinforcement in the future, and may not even be able to suppress the revival of the Danish navy. Therefore, the Bassa coalition cannot be allowed to break through Hamburg at this moment. Otherwise, the enemy will increase its strength after taking Hamburg's huge wealth. When I lose the enemy's strength, Lübeck's prospects will be even worse. After looking at the thinking speaker tag fact, Marin continued, moreover, I suspect that the enemy is not really going to attack Hamburg this time, but to lure my 20,000 main forces out of the city, and then annihilate my 20,000 people outside the city. After all, they have no way to hide my army in Lübeck. However, if my army goes out of the city to support Hamburg, it means that it has lost the support of the city wall. Facing 50,000 enemy troops, the chances of winning are really not high. Speaker Tagfact was shocked, and at this time, he also reacted. If Marin's 20,000 troops were really surrounded by 50,000 Bassa coalition forces outside the city, it would indeed be a dangerous situation. If Marin's 20,000 men were gone, Lübeck would lose its greatest military support and would be doomed sooner or later. After thinking it over again and again, Grand Speaker Tagfact asked cautiously, Lord Marin, how did you determine that the enemy was pretending to besiege Hamburg? Come with me, Lord Speaker. After that, Marin took Grand Speaker Tagfact to the southern wall. Marin pointed to the Bassa coalition crossing the Travo River in the south of the city and said, Lord Speaker, you see, the enemy is obviously crossing the river to the southeast. On the surface, it is indeed going to attack Hamburg. After all, the other party has declared war on our four-party alliance. Grand Speaker Tagfact nodded and agreed with Marin's judgment. But if you look carefully, you will understand that there is something wrong. Marin continued. Wrong place. Grand Speaker Tagfact looked carefully and did not see anything unusual. Seeing that Grand Speaker Tagfahet didn't seem that smart, Marin had to remind him, is the action of the Bassa coalition a little slow? Dawdling? Grand Speaker Tagfahet stared at it in confusion for a while before he found the problem. Then, he nodded and said, well, it's indeed a little slow. But what does this show? Obviously, Grand Speaker Tagfahet's military literacy is not very high. This shows that the enemy doesn't really want to leave. If they really want to attack Hamburg, they should withdraw their troops quickly, and then go to the southeast to quickly surround and attack Hamburg city. Instead of dawdling like now, as if they are unwilling to leave. Obviously, they are waiting for my army to leave the city and fight them. Grand Speaker Tagfahet thought about it, and then suddenly realized, so that's the case. Lord Marin is more shrewd. You can actually see the enemy's intentions from the subtle details. Grand Speaker Tagfahet exclaimed. He is not unintelligent, but his talent is all in politics, and he is not particularly familiar with military affairs. However, after Marin's explanation, he soon understood. Thank you for the compliment, Mr. Speaker. After all, I got rich by fighting. Fighting is my capital, so I am naturally more proficient in it. And you are a political strongman who brought Lübeck to glory. In this regard, I am not as good as you. Marin also flattered the other party very politely. Then let's not rescue Hamburg. Anyway, the other party just wants to lure you to send troops. After listening to Marin's explanation, Speaker Tagfact turned against Marin sending troops. After all, Marin's army is Lübeck's last hope. No, we still have to send troops. If I don't move, they will really attack Hamburg. Marin shook his head and said firmly. Why? Speaker Tagfact was a little puzzled. This is the opponent's conspiracy, leaving me with no choice. If I dare to send troops, I will be eliminated outside the city. If I don't send troops, they will really besiege Hamburg. Anyway, after taking Hamburg, Brandenburg and Saxony will be full, even full. Not only can they successfully solve the commission of Swiss mercenaries, but they can also make a lot of money. After all, Hamburg is a Hanseatic commercial city second only to Lübeck. After thinking for a while, Grand Speaker Tagfact nodded and exclaimed, "Conspiracy. This word is used very well. Indeed, we know the opponent's plan, but we are a little at a loss, which makes people embarrassed. Then, what should we do? Just watch Hamburg finish like this? No, it's not that there is no way. I still have a backup, maybe I can successfully defeat the opponent." Marin smiled mysteriously. However, he did not tell Grand Speaker Tagfact all his cards, in case there were spies from Saxony and Brandenburg in the Lübeck parliament. After all, seeing that there was no hope, these congressmen who were originally merchants might bet on both sides at the same time. If someone revealed his cards to the Bossa coalition, his 18,000 coalition troops might be intercepted and surrounded by Frederick III. Therefore, the fewer people who knew about his 18,000 strong reinforcements, the better. Chapter 444, Kahn's Plot. At present, the only people who probably know about the 18,000 reinforcements are Hamburg Grand Speaker Heisenberg and several major Hamburg members. However, Heisenberg is actually not very clear about the real news of Marin's reinforcements. He only knows that the army of the Duchy of Schleswig, which can carry 20,000 troops, was lent to Marin. According to Heisenberg and several Hamburg members, the Duchy of Schleswig will probably send 10,000 regular troops, plus 10,000 civilians, as well as various supplies and baggage, so many ships are needed. What he doesn't know is that most of these ships are actually used to carry the main combat soldiers. According to Marin's design, if these 18,000 main forces can successfully lurk near the Bossa coalition and complete the raid on the enemy from behind, then the Bossa coalition will definitely be defeated, or at least retreat. At that time, these 18,000 people can join the main force, and there will be no need for so many civilians. Moreover, if you go by water, because you use ships, you don't need too many civilians at all. Moreover, the sailors on the ships provided by the Hamburgers were enough to play the role of civilians. Only long-distance marches on land require enough civilians to pull carts to transport food and supplies. If they all go by water, very few civilians are needed. Because the supplies are all loaded on the ship. After sending off Grand Speaker Tagfact, Marin immediately called Schwartz, Saul and others to study the changes in the battle plan. Obviously, after the Bossa coalition left the camp southeast of Lübeck, the previous battle plan needed to be overturned. And the reinforcements of Wolf Esprand and Sakara could no longer follow the original plan and take the previously scheduled route. If they still go that way, they will definitely collide head-on with the Bossa coalition. Because now the Bossa coalition is slowly advancing towards Hamburg along the Elbe-Lübeck Canal. If the reinforcements ships still take this canal, it is equivalent to meeting the Bossa coalition head-on. What's the point of a sneak attack at that time? However, if the reinforcements were to land on the east bank of the Elbe River near Hamburg, the possibility of leaks would be too great. Because Hamburg is a big city with people coming and going. Here, if you want to walk 18,000 troops and keep it secret, dream on. Marin estimated that at this moment, there were hundreds of scouts sent by various countries lurking around Hamburg, which was not a problem. After all, the scale of this war was too large, and it might determine the future direction of Germany, so it must be taken seriously by all countries. Moreover, it was different from Lübeck. Lübeck had been besieged by the Bossa coalition, and many scouts of the Bossa coalition had been sent out. Scouts from other vassal states might not dare to approach. Otherwise, it would be easy for the Bossa coalition scouts to treat them as enemies and get rid of them. On the Hamburg side, because there was no army yet, there was no cavalry responsible for clearing scouts outside the city. It was normal for those who wanted to get information to hang around Hamburg. Even the Bossa coalition might have sent a large number of scouts. In this case, even if Marin dispatched the 200 scout cavalrymen who specialized in intercepting scouts, he might not have enough time to intercept the scouts of various countries near Hamburg. After all, Hamburg can help clean up the people in Hamburg. As for those around Hamburg, it is more difficult to deal with them. 200 people are definitely not enough. If a scout escapes and reports to the Bossa coalition that nearly 20,000 troops have landed in Hamburg, what the hell, then there is no sneak attack. Therefore, Marin needs to find a way to divert the attention of scouts from various countries in and outside Hamburg and cover the landing of reinforcements. The best way is to make a big news in Hamburg and attract all the nearby scouts. Then, the 18,000 reinforcements under his command will choose a place not close to Hamburg to land, head east overnight, and attack the enemy camp directly. Make a big news in Hamburg to attract the attention of scouts from various countries. Schwartz asked back. Yes, Hamburg is a center of gossip anyway. It's easy to attract people by making a big news there. As long as the Hamburg people steal the limelight, then no one will notice our reinforcements. Everyone was silent for a long time, obviously trying to think of a solution. At this time, Con, who had always been regarded as a mascot by Marin in such occasions, suddenly spoke, "Master, I have a solution." Con suddenly raised his hand and said, "You have another solution?" Marin was surprised, and several other senior generals also looked at Muscle Stick Con in surprise. "My goodness, you are a thug with muscles all over your head, and you still want to steal our jobs. You are not here to make fun of me, right?" Con ignored the surprised looks of the others, and said to himself, "Master, if you want Hamburg to attract the enemy's attention, it's very simple, let the Hamburg Parliament recruit 10,000 troops by itself." "That's it?" Schwartz asked dully. "What else do you want?" "It's just to attract attention. There are so many people in Hamburg City, just find 10,000 people to make up the number and scare the servants." Con said nonchalantly. After Marin lowered his head and thought for a while, he slapped his thigh and said, "It's really a good idea. 10,000 troops can really attract everyone's attention. Even if it is recruiting 10,000 pigs, it is estimated that it can attract everyone's attention. The big scene is the most eye-catching. After all, no matter what era, most people like to watch the excitement. It is difficult for Hamburg to recruit 10,000 troops in a big way without attracting attention. What's more, Hamburg is an international metropolis with people coming and going. As long as Hamburg City recruits troops in a big way, it will definitely attract the attention of scouts from various countries. At that time, no one will pay attention to the countryside outside Hamburg City. After all, something big happened in Hamburg. It made everyone in the vicinity of Hamburg focus their attention on the newly formed 10,000-strong army in Hamburg. Marin's real reinforcements landed quietly and then rushed to the camp of the Bosse coalition overnight. At this time, in order to get information, those scouts from various countries would definitely rush into Hamburg. Hamburg has now implemented a curfew. In the middle of the night, Marin's reinforcements landed in the countryside north of Hamburg. Those scouts from various countries who rushed into Hamburg to get information had no chance to come out to check the news. At this time, it was absolutely enough to use Saul's 200 professional scout cavalrymen who were specialized in intercepting scouts to block the eastward intersection. After all, most of the scouts from various countries were attracted by the big move in Hamburg City at this time, and were trapped in the city by the curfew. Marin patted Con on the shoulder with a smile, and said, "I didn't expect that a muscle man like you could come up with such a good idea. Tell me, how did you come up with this good idea?" Con scratched his head honestly and said, "I didn't think much about it, but suddenly I remembered that Wolf Esperand had got 8,000 militiamen to pretend to be reinforcements to deceive the Bosse coalition. I thought, let's learn from that guy and let Hamburg also get a fake army to attract everyone's attention, right? It's very simple." Looking at Con's honest smile, everyone felt a little blocked in their hearts. Damn, it's so simple, why can't I think of it? They were simply outdone by this muscle man Con. Chapter 445, The Next Big Game. After adopting Con's plan, Marin secretly sent someone to ride a horse in the middle of the night to Hamburg to discuss the matter secretly with the Hamburg Grand Chancellor. Heisenberg was very excited after receiving Marin's secret letter. Because Marin told him in his heart that more than 10,000 reinforcements would arrive from the north. If Hamburg could create 10,000 fake armies to attract the attention of the Bosse coalition. At that time, the real reinforcements would launch a surprise attack on the Bosse coalition. The four-party alliance might really defeat the extremely powerful Bosse coalition. Originally, whether it was Lübeck or Hamburg, most people were pessimistic about this war. Because the opponent was too powerful. The 50,000 main battle force not only had 20,000 Swiss mercenaries who were famous in Europe and powerful, but also the remaining 30,000 were veterans from Brandenburg and Saxony. Faced with such a powerful lineup, even the French might not be able to beat it, not to mention that only Marin's army in the four-party alliance could fight. But the problem is that Marin only has 20,000 main battle troops to pull out. The remaining 20,000 people need to guard the homeland and the Duchy of Schleswig. The Duchy of Schleswig, in particular, is likely to face an attack from the Danish army and cannot be extricated. Marin told Heisenberg in a letter that his homeland was actually guarded by conscripts, and the banner he raised was also deceptive. The real main force is quietly on the way to Hamburg. The ship borrowed before was used to pull these people. Heisenberg's military literacy is a little higher than Tagfact. He thought about it carefully and found that if Hamburg could gather 10,000 fake troops to attract the Bosse coalition, and then Marin's more than 10,000 coalition forces would quietly attack the enemy in the area, not to say that they could completely defeat the enemy, but at least they could repel the enemy and bring a turning point to both Lübeck and Hamburg. At least, after being attacked, the enemy must have suffered heavy losses and may not be stronger than Marin's army. In this way, Heisenberg was full of hope and no longer as pessimistic as before. However, in the secret letter, Marin asked Heisenberg, the Grand Chancellor, not to start recruiting 10,000 fake troops for the time being, but just to make some advance preparations. Because Marin was playing a big game. This big game was very grand, and Hamburg's plan was just one of them. Marin planned to take into account the 20,000 troops in Lübeck, the 8,000 fake reinforcements in the north, the 18,000 reinforcements waiting to be loaded on the southwest coast of the Duchy of Schleswig, and the 50,000 troops and 30,000 civilians of the Bossa coalition. The specific approach was that Marin decided to challenge the Bossa coalition head-on, and set up a battle on the flat land on the west bank of the Travo River across the city of Lübeck, and fight the Bossa coalition head-on. Marin was not worried that Frederick III and Joachim I would disagree, because they were eager to have a decisive battle with him in the field. However, Marin's real intention was not to fight the Bossa coalition to death, but to form a formation to defend and temporarily withstand the opponent's impact. His real killer move was the 18,000 reinforcements led by Wolf Esperand and Sakara. Once Marin withstood the attack of the Bossa coalition on the front battlefield, when their morale declined, it was time for the 18,000 reinforcements to attack them. Marin remembered that in the Chinese textbook of his previous life, Chao Gui's discussion on war, it was said that, the first effort was vigorous, the second was weak, and the third was exhausted. As long as the 20,000 main forces led by Marin personally formed a Spanish phalanx and withstood the three axes of the Bossa coalition in the early stage, the morale of the opponent would definitely decline. Then, Marin would lead his army to fight with them for a day. By night, both the opponent and his own 20,000 troops would be exhausted. Even if it was to guard against a night attack, the Bossa coalition would definitely send scouts to monitor the positions of the 20,000 troops led by Marin, and would not worry about the rear. Because Marin would deliberately let Frederick III and Joachim I know that the 10,000 troops of Hamburg were used to scare people. As long as they knew this, the Bossa coalition would no longer pay attention to the danger in the west. Because they couldn't believe that the 10,000 temporary ragtag troops of Hamburg would dare to take the initiative to attack. Then, their attention would be drawn to the southwest. At the same time, at the specified time, the main force of the disguised 10,000 troops in the north would arrive at a place near the northern theater of war on time, set up camp, and attract the attention of the Bossa coalition. At that time, the 50,000 people of the Bossa coalition might be forced to arrange tens of thousands of people to go north to intercept. Even if the other party knew that the 10,000 troops had 5,000 new recruits, for the sake of safety, they would definitely send tens of thousands of troops to intercept. At this time, there were only about 40,000 people left in the Bossa coalition on the front battlefield. If the 18,000 coalition forces launched a night attack, Marin would definitely take 20,000 main forces to cooperate and attack the enemy camp together. There are 38,000 troops attacking the camp of 40,000 enemy troops. Even if the enemy is prepared, it may not be useful. Because Marin's army knows the tactics of rapid penetration and encirclement, and has done many drills. As long as the 38,000 troops on his side surround the 40,000 enemy troops, no matter how strong the enemy is, it will be difficult to turn over the waves. As for the tens of thousands of troops going to the north to intercept 10,000 enemy troops, they may not dare to let the 10,000 troops go back easily. Even if they go back to help, Marin is confident that he can stop them. Moreover, at that time, Marin will arrange for 10,000 militiamen disguised as 10,000 reinforcements in the north to set up camp across the river near the battlefield and confront the troops sent by the enemy to block. After the battle in the enemy's camp started, these tens of thousands of militiamen will also make a fuss in the middle of the night to create momentum and scare the tens of thousands of enemy troops who came to intercept, so as to prevent them from retreating to reinforce the camp. Unless the other party can safely watch the enemy army stalking behind them. Without knowing the true details of these tens of thousands of civilians, they would not dare to withdraw easily. At that time, I will lead the musketeers to rush into the main account of the Bossa coalition and capture Frederick III and Joachim I, and the battle will be over. Of course, the key point of this big chess game is to let Frederick III and Joachim I know the fact that Hamburg is about to recruit 10,000 troops from the people and intends to use them to deceive the Bossa coalition. In this way, the scouts sent by the Bossa coalition to the southwest will definitely attract most of the scouts sent by the Bossa coalition near Hamburg as Hamburg's large-scale public conscription. After the scouts are attracted to Hamburg to pay attention to the recruitment news, Wolf Esperand and Sakara's army can land smoothly from the riverside area north of Hamburg, and then turn in overnight to attack the rear of the Bossa coalition. Because the newly recruited 10,000 miscellaneous troops in Hamburg will make the Bossa coalition give up their vigilance. After all, it was a super ragtag army made up of civilians who knew nothing about war, and they had no fighting power at all. Therefore, after learning that there were only 10,000 newly formed ragtag troops in Hamburg in the west, the arrogant Frederick III and Joachim I would relax their defenses on the western front and concentrate on dealing with Marin and his 20,000 troops who were outside the city of Lübeck to fight a decisive battle with their main force. When they relaxed their vigilance against the west, the army of Wolf Esperant and Sakara arrived and launched a night attack. With no defense, I don't believe they will not be defeated. Chapter 446, Dead Agent. If you want to deliberately let Frederick III and Joachim I know the false information that you deliberately leaked, you need to deliberately throw a copy to them. Before, Marin had asked Wolf Esperant to do it once. However, Marin always felt that his deliberate disclosure of false information last time was too low level. That is to say, in Europe in the early 16th century when conspiracies were not popular, if it were in China, even if the other party picked up such information, it would be unlikely to believe it. Because such easily obtained information is very easy to arouse suspicion. Therefore, since it is necessary to leak false information to the other party again this time, more sophisticated methods are needed. For example, Morse code, which is often used in spy movies, and methods such as revealing handwriting after being immersed in water. However, Morse code is too complicated, I can understand it, but it is almost impossible for the enemy to decipher it. Even the spies under his command do not understand this technology. As for the method of revealing words by immersion in water, Marin knows the principle, but there is no relevant material. For example, the most commonly used combination of starch and iodine. Starch is easy to find, but iodine, it seems that there is no iodine in this era. As for the method of turmeric and alkaline water reacting to produce blood red, Marin tried it in his previous life and failed, so he naturally couldn't use it this time. After thinking about it, Marin decided to use the method he used to deceive Mikkel last time, the double-layer paper method. That is, glue two pieces of parchment together. On the upper layer of paper, there is also a piece of information, but it is fake. And the covered parchment is the real information. As for whether he will be discovered through the paper. Ordinary paper may be discovered, but parchment will not. Because parchment is very thick. Of course, the parchment that Marin chose to make double-layer parchment is the thinnest among parchments. In this way, it is difficult to reveal the secret when the two pieces of parchment are put together. Otherwise, if the two pieces of parchment are glued together and the weight is too large, it is easy to arouse suspicion. Therefore, two relatively thin parchments were needed, glued together to create a double-layer parchment that was slightly heavier than ordinary parchment. So, Marin decided to make such a false intelligence. The upper layer contained very false intelligence. The lower layer contained false intelligence that looked very much like the real intelligence. If Frederick III and Joachim I got this intelligence and saw the real intelligence on the lower layer, they would definitely believe it. Because this intelligence was hidden so deeply, there was no reason for it to be false. Only information that is too easy to obtain will be false. After all, Europe has not yet been baptized by various schemes at this time, and it would not have thought that information hidden so deeply might also be false. However, Marin is worried that even if he really creates such false information, he is afraid that Frederick III and Joachim I will not be able to discover the real information he has carefully prepared because of negligence. Therefore, Marin needs a spy to guide these two people, tear open two layers of parchment, and find the real information. However, if this spy goes to guide Frederick III and Joachim I, he must not leave casually. Once the real battle starts, this person will be dead, and he will definitely be killed by the furious Frederick III and Joachim I to vent his anger. Therefore, such a spy is actually a dead spy. The so-called dead spy is a spy who can hardly escape death after performing a mission. There are very few such spies. After all, most people cherish their lives. Many spies who dare to sacrifice their lives are forced. Only a few voluntarily die. However, the success rate of dead spies in deceiving the enemy is the highest. Why? Because when the enemy sees that the life and death of the dead spies are in their hands, they will naturally trust him more. When they are finished, they find that they have been deceived by the dead spies, but it is too late. Even if they kill the dead spies, they are powerless to save the situation. Therefore, normal dead spies often die together with the enemy. Marin suddenly found that it was not easy to find a qualified dead spy under his command. First of all, the dead spies must be smart enough to make the enemy believe you when carrying out the mission. Then, the spy needs to be determined to die. However, the actual situation is that smart spies are afraid of death, while spies who are not afraid of death are a little stupid. People who are too stupid cannot carry out the dead spy plan. Otherwise, if the enemy finds out the flaw, even if he loses his life, if the enemy doesn't believe it, then his death is in vain. Just when Marin was having a headache about the choice of the dead spy, Jim, the ace spy under Marin, came to Lübeck in person to deliver intelligence in the name of Wolf Esprand. Huh. This Jim seems to be a good candidate. Marin thought seriously. Jim is a very smart person with a super memory and a strong talent for language. He not only speaks German, English, Frisian, Latin, Swedish and other languages, but also is proficient in multiple German dialects. Communicating with people is also his strong point. Moreover, this person is very skilled. He once worshipped Cage, the former gold medal fighter of Wolf Esprand, as his teacher, and learned a lot of special forces methods, and his skills are very good. A person with a good mind and good skills, Marin naturally trained him as a king's spy, hoping that he could become his own 007. Under normal circumstances, Marin is absolutely unwilling to send such an ace spy to be a dead spy. After all, a king's spy is so precious. However, in this case, if you don't send a king's spy like Jim, and send other people, Marin is really afraid of making things worse and failing to deceive Frederick III. After all, Marin can't afford to lose this decisive battle of tens of thousands of troops. If he loses, he may die. Even if he doesn't die, his huge interests will be eaten up by the victorious enemy. And he will be beaten back to his original form. Whether he dies or is beaten back to his original form, Marin doesn't want to see it. Therefore, it is necessary to pass false information to Frederick III and Joachim I and induce them to make wrong judgments and decisions. Only in this way can he have a chance to defeat them and keep everything he has. Therefore, Marin decided to have a good talk with Jim and persuade him to serve as this dead spy. Of course, in order to protect a king's spy like Jim, Marin will try every means to keep Jim alive. However, because he is engaged in the task of a dead spy, even if he has a good mind and strong skills, the chance of survival is very low. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called a dead spy. It's just that it's hard to let an ace spy like Jim act as a dead spy. But in the end, Marin decided to send Jim to the Bossa coalition to agree to act as this dead spy. Because only Jim can fool an old fox like Frederick III. If you change someone with less ability, you might not be able to deceive Frederick III at all. And if that's the case, the dead spy you sent out would be a joke. If the enemy is not deceived, the 18,000 reinforcements commanded by Wolf Esprand and Sakara are likely to be discovered halfway. Then, they ran into the enemy's encirclement and were annihilated. If the 18,000 people were annihilated, then Marin would lose his greatest reliance. It is difficult to defeat the enemy's 50,000 troops with only 20,000 people in his hands. In the end, Marin determined his idea and called Jim with a firm face, intending to communicate with him so that he would be willing to act as this dead spy. Chapter 447, The Ace Comes Out. Soon, Jim, who was unaware of the situation, was called to the temporary office prepared by the Lübeck people for Marin. At the same time, Marin's guards drove away the people nearby, leaving Marin and Jim with a confidential conversation space. After Marin motioned Jim to sit down, he said to Jim with a serious face, "Jim, you should know the change in the situation, right?" Jim nodded. He naturally knew that the camp of the Bossa coalition began to move to the southwest. Although the relocation speed was not fast, it was still taken. The enemy army has moved, so the previous plan of the fleet carrying reinforcements to Lübeck through the Elbe-Lübeck Canal and then attacking the Bossa coalition camp will have to be changed. Indeed. But the problem now is that although the enemy may be fainting, if our army does not go out of the city to fight, they may really attack Hamburg. After all, Hamburg is also a very rich city, and its defense is not strong now. Therefore, there should be quite a lot of Bossa coalition scouts in Hamburg at this time. Your Excellency is wise. Jim agreed with Marin's judgment and flattered him a little. So, now the reinforcements from the north can only land a little north of Hamburg and then launch a surprise attack on the enemy camp. However, I am worried that the enemy's scouts distributed around Hamburg will discover the movement of the reinforcements. As long as they are discovered, the surprise attack will be impossible. Then, the 18,000 reinforcements may be destroyed by the enemy. Marin sighed. As a spy sent by the king, Jim is very smart and naturally heard the hidden meaning in Marin's words. So, he immediately stood up and said, "My lord, if you have any orders, just give them." Marin pretended to hesitate for a moment, and told Jim about his request to recruit 10,000 civilians from Hamburg to pretend to be reinforcements to attract the attention of the scouts of the Bossa coalition. Jim thought about it and said, "My lord, asking Hamburg to recruit 10,000 civilians to pretend to be reinforcements can indeed attract the enemy's attention. However, if the enemy sends troops to guard against Hamburg's fake reinforcements, it will also cause trouble for our real reinforcements. According to this situation, when your main force is fighting the enemy outside the city, the enemy is likely to send 10,000 troops to guard against Hamburg at all times. Although it is in the southwest direction, that army is defending to the west after all. Maybe, 10,000 troops will be arranged to the west of the military camp. At that time, it will affect the sneak attack of our real reinforcements. Jim was very smart and quickly saw the loophole in this plan. As long as the Bossa coalition arranged enough defense forces in the west, it would also affect the sneak attack of the real reinforcements. Marin nodded in appreciation. He admired Jim's brain very much and was reluctant to let him be a spy. However, this war was a matter of life and death, so he had to send this trump card to perform related tasks. If he failed, this trump card would definitely leave him and turn to other nobles. Therefore, it is better to let him perform this task to ensure his victory. Of course, such a smart man cannot be forced, and it is best to persuade him. I thought of what you said. So, I thought of a way to solve this problem. The news that Hamburg's 10,000 troops were fake reinforcements was deliberately revealed to the Bossa coalition to let them know that the reinforcements from the west were fake. In this way, they will not heavily guard the west. But why did you let Hamburg come up with 10,000 fake reinforcements? What's the point of this? Jim asked, puzzled. It's very simple. Attract all the spies and scouts near Hamburg and draw them into the city of Hamburg. In this way, no one will be bored and pay attention to the news from the north outside Hamburg. You know, Hamburg has implemented a curfew, which can trap the spies and scouts who come into the city to get information at night. Jim nodded thoughtfully and said, I understand. You want Hamburg to make a big noise, attract all the attention, and cover the whereabouts of our real reinforcements. Then, tell the enemy that it is a fake reinforcement. However, their spies and scouts were attracted into the city of Hamburg and were monitored. Especially the curfew, which can prevent our reinforcements from being discovered by the enemy's scouts when they land. That's really smart. I think you should be responsible for intelligence work in the future. Marin said excitedly. I'm responsible for intelligence work? What about Lord Kohler? Jim was a little confused. Kohler, he has a lot of things to do, how can he spend so much time on intelligence? When the time comes, you will help him. Kohler will only ask about intelligence work when he is free. Normally, you will take care of it. Thank you for your cultivation. Jim said excitedly. Don't be busy yet, I have a problem and I hope you can help me solve it. If this is done well, not only will you be Kohler's deputy, but I can also promote you to a baronet. Marin offered a benefit to tempt him. This. Duke, is the mission very dangerous? Jim was surprised at first, after all, that was a baron. Although it was the lowest level among the 3 levels of baron, it was also a nobleman with a fief. However, Jim soon realized the situation, the richer the reward, the greater the merit. The greater the merit, the more dangerous this mission must be. Marin sighed and said, it is indeed dangerous, because I plan to send you to pretend to be a messenger with false information, and then deliberately get caught. Then, I will deliberately reveal the part of the false information that seems to be true to the enemy so that they will believe it. Then, why not just pretend to lose the information on the ground like last time? Jim knew the danger as soon as he heard it. If he really entered the enemy's tent, even if the other party trusted him, it would be difficult to leave. After all, there are 50,000 troops in the enemy camp. It is very difficult to escape. I want to, but this kind of thing can only happen once and not twice. Frederick III is a cunning man. If the same trick is used twice, he will definitely be suspicious. So, this time, I changed a trick. Then, Marin told Jim about the double parchment. This is indeed a good idea. Your Excellency, you mean that I should pretend to rebel and tell Frederick III and Joachim I about the double parchment to gain their trust? Yes, that's it. This kind of information is hidden so deeply that it will be easier for them to believe it after they get it. Moreover, with your wisdom, it should not be difficult to make them believe it, right? Jim nodded and said bitterly, yes, it is indeed not difficult to make Lord Frederick III and Joachim I believe what I say. However, it is almost impossible to escape from the enemy's camp of 50,000 troops afterwards. That's why I'm offering you the title of baronet. Marin looked at Jim meaningfully, and then continued, don't worry, as long as you complete the mission and escape alive, you will definitely get the title of baronet. Even if you don't escape, as long as the mission is completed, I will give this title of baronet to your son John. At the same time, I will take good care of your family and ensure that they will not suffer any grievances. Even when John grows up, he can serve as Caesar's attendant. Jim suddenly felt as if a bucket of ice water was poured from head to toe, and his whole body was cold. He understood that Marin was both reassuring him and warning him. Jim had been married for a long time and had two sons. The elder one was called John and the younger one was called Louis. Both were very popular names. These two sons were Jim's favorites, as well as his wife Leah and parents, all living in the Spy family compound in Oryx City. The reason why the family lived in the Spy family compound was both for protection and the fact that they were taken hostage. If they worked hard for Marin, Marin would naturally treat these spy families as warmly as his relatives. But once they betrayed, the whole family would die. Jim clearly remembered that soon after a spy was captured and tortured by the enemy, his entire family was taken out and executed, even the baby was not spared. Moreover, the guy who betrayed was soon assassinated by the assassins sent by the North Sea Chamber of Commerce. Therefore, Marin treated the rebellious spies very cruelly. For the safety of their families, spies often choose to end their lives after being caught. Otherwise, the whole family would have no way to survive. After swallowing hard, Jim asked, "Then, what if my mission fails and I die?" He did not say he would betray, nor did he dare to betray. Marin thought for a moment and said, "The reward for asking you to buy Cantrera and poison Prince Christian is a hereditary knight and a manor fiefdom. Also, the name, James Bond, will be given to you. If you fail this time and die, although you did not poison Prince Christian, I will still confer the title of hereditary knight on your eldest son John. The youngest son Louis will also be conferred the title of ordinary knight, but not hereditary. As for the surname Bond, it will still be given to your family. After all, you are a noble now, and you need a surname." Jim breathed a sigh of relief and said, "I see. Thank you, His Excellency the Duke, for the reward." Marin was very happy to see Jim agree to take on this extremely dangerous task. However, he still reminded, "Jim, even if you fail, I will knight your two sons. But the problem is, I can't fail. If I lose the war and lose all the territory, then I can't do anything about your son's desire to become a noble. So, you'd better complete the task. If you complete the task, you are a baron alive, and if you unfortunately fail to come back, your son will also be a baron." Jim was stunned, but after thinking about it carefully, it was really the truth. Marin can only fulfill various rewards if he wins. If he loses, he will have nothing, so what can he use to reward others? So, this time, he can only win, not lose. As for Marin's credit, Jim still believes it. Because Marin has always been very fair and strict in rewarding and punishing his subordinates, and has never broken his promise. So, with a tragic mood, Jim took a heavy step and left Marin's office. On the contrary, Marin was in a very relaxed mood. Because Jim is his ace spy. The ace is out, one is worth two. Chapter 448 Perfect and Reasonable False Information. The ace spy has been dispatched, and Marin has almost made a big bet this time. Therefore, the relevant false intelligence cannot be wrong. Otherwise, it would be a big loss if he sacrificed the life of an ace spy but failed to fool the old fox Frederick III. Therefore, Marin locked himself in the room and began to rack his brains to design a false intelligence that looked very reasonable. At least, he had to fool the cunning Zugetli. And the key point of a false intelligence that can fool an old fox is to be reasonable, so reasonable that people can't jump out of any problems. Otherwise, there are a lot of loopholes, let alone, Zugetli, even Joachim I, the young man, may not believe it. If that were the case, Jim, the king's spy, would probably be pushed out of the camp and beheaded before he had time to fool. So, Marin racked his brains for this intelligence and thought a lot. First of all, this intelligence must be sent to Hamburg. Otherwise, the route that does not pass through the west may not be discovered by the scouts of the Bossa coalition. Secondly, this intelligence needs to mention that Hamburg should recruit 10,000 troops. Originally, Marin planned to suggest in this letter that Hamburg Grand Speaker Heisenberg start recruiting 10,000 civilians to pretend to be reinforcements. However, Marin suddenly thought that it would take a long time to recruit 10,000 troops. If he waited until this letter was sent before starting to recruit, it would be too late. Moreover, the real intelligence in the interlayer would leak the news that Hamburg's 10,000 troops were fake. If this is the case, the spies and scouts of the Bossa coalition around Hamburg may not enter the city to inquire about the news, and they will not be trapped in the city by Hamburg. At that time, these spies and scouts outside the city will easily find the traces of reinforcements. Therefore, Marin thought about it and decided to write a letter to inform Hamburg Grand Speaker Heisenberg immediately let him start recruiting civilians now. Even, he had to send troops to the surrounding countryside to capture strong men. In this way, the spies and scouts who were lurking in the surrounding villages would be shocked. At that time, they only had two choices, to leave or enter the city. However, due to the intelligence personnel's thirst for intelligence, they would most likely choose to enter the city to further inquire about the news. They might even disguise themselves as captured men and mix into the army to gather intelligence. However, Marin would not give them the opportunity to pass on the intelligence. Because, Marin told Heisenberg, once 10,000 men were gathered, Hamburg City would start a closed mode, with only entry and no exit. At the same time, there was a curfew. By then, even if those spies and scouts wanted to pass on the intelligence, it would be difficult. Because the whole city was closed. If they wanted to go out, they would be killed on the spot if they were discovered. Moreover, Hamburg City would prohibit any horses from leaving the city at that time. Without horses, even if people left the city, it would be difficult to deliver intelligence in time. Not only that, Hamburg will also send out cavalry squads to patrol nearby villages and confiscate all horses to prevent spies from using these horses to report out of the city. At that time, Saul's 200 musketeers who specialize in intercepting scouts will also take another 500 cavalrymen, under the banner of Hamburg City, to patrol the villages north of Hamburg City and temporarily seize all horses to prevent them from being used by those hidden enemy scouts. If any good warhorse-level horses are found in the village, they will be investigated immediately. After all, those scouts can disguise themselves as civilians and mix in the village. But their horses are definitely different from the draft horses used in the village. At that time, Saul's scouts will confiscate all horses and strictly check those riding horses of unknown origin. Even if the enemy scouts cannot be caught, confiscating the horses of all villages near the landing area of the army can also make those spies and scouts blind. At that time, even if they found the landing army, they could not immediately pass on the information. Because they had no horses. If they walked to report the news, when the army landed, the light cavalry patrolling nearby were not blind. If they saw passers-by running wildly on the road in the middle of the night, they would definitely capture or kill them directly. Moreover, Hamburg is only 35 kilometers away from Lübeck. Hamburg is southwest of Lübeck. If you land from the north of Hamburg, the straight-line distance is shorter. Moreover, the main battlefield must be in the west of Lübeck, closer to the landing point. If you land at night, you can march quickly all night and arrive just before dawn. And this time is when people are most sleepy. If you launch a sneak attack, the effect will be best. This is the real plan, but the plan deliberately leaked to Frederick III is like this. In order to protect Hamburg, Marin took the initiative to challenge the Bosse coalition and agreed to a head-on confrontation in the west of Lübeck. The Bosse coalition already has an advantage and will definitely not refuse the opportunity for this head-on confrontation. Then, after the two sides lined up to fight, Marin's 20,000 troops tried their best to hold their positions and resist the enemy's attack. Then, 10,000 reinforcements will be sent from Hamburg, and at the same time, 10,000 reinforcements from the north will also arrive. However, the 10,000 reinforcements from Hamburg are fake, they just need to show their faces and then build a stronghold to protect themselves. At the same time, the 10,000 reinforcements in the north are also not suitable for real assaults on the enemy's positions because half of them are new recruits. Therefore, they will also build a stronghold to protect themselves near the Bosse coalition. At this time, the Bosse coalition, which is not clear about the situation, will definitely divide its troops to block the reinforcements from these two directions for safety. Marin will estimate in the intelligence that 10,000 people will be sent to the west and the north to resist. At this time, Marin's 20,000 troops will only face 30,000 main combat troops. Then, Marin will fight hard, use 30,000 people to fight hard, and try to defeat these 30,000 people. When the enemy's 30,000 main forces are defeated, even if the 20,000 people who were deceived to leave return to help, it will be useless. Because, as long as the morale is lost, the soldiers will be afraid, and the soldiers' defeat and escape will be uncontrollable. Otherwise, how can we say, the defeat is like a mountain collapsing? Then, of course, Marin won. Facing the chaotic enemy, when should we not chase and kill them? To put it bluntly, the core idea of this intelligence is to use fake reinforcements to trick the Bosse coalition into splitting up, so that their frontal forces are reduced to about 30,000. At this time, the difference in the strength of the two sides is not big. If you fight to the death, you may not have the possibility of winning. Of course, this plan is the most suitable plan without real reinforcements. Moreover, there is nothing wrong with it. It seems that in the absence of reinforcements, this is Marin's best choice and the only choice to win. No matter who sees this plan, they will think it is very reasonable. Moreover, these old-fashioned European generals will be convinced by Marin's bold plan. As for doubting its authenticity, the European generals who have rarely been deceived by tricks may not have the ability to see the problem. After all, this plan is too perfect and reasonable. Use the false troops to make the enemy split up and weaken their frontal forces. Then, take advantage of the small difference in the number of both sides on the front battlefield and let the elite troops of the headquarters fight to the death. This is too reasonable, it would be unreasonable not to do so. As for the issue of reinforcements, because both the sea and the land were blocked, I am afraid that Frederick III and Joachim I did not expect that Denmark's 20,000 troops would be defeated so quickly. After all, they did not expect Marin to bring back 10,000 troops from England. Moreover, it is unpredictable that Prince Christian was poisoned and lying in bed. Under normal circumstances, the intelligence that Marin deliberately revealed before, saying that on the northern battlefield, the Duchy of Schleswig left half of its main force with civilians to resist the attack of the Danish army, is reasonable. Therefore, facing such perfect and reasonable, true, intelligence, the best choice for the Bosse coalition is to allocate some troops to intercept the 10,000 reinforcements in the north, which are, half of them are veterans. After all, if there is a large army of 5,000 veterans, if they are really ignored, when the two sides are fighting, this group of people suddenly rush out from the flank, which is extremely destructive. But Frederick III and Joachim I don't know that the intelligence of 5,000 veterans among 10,000 people is also false. However, with Frederick III's caution, he certainly wouldn't dare to gamble. If there are really 5,000 veterans among these 10,000 people, it would also be a good fighting force. If they attack the left wing, it would be easy to get into trouble. Therefore, it is necessary to send a large army to resist. As for the West, since the 10,000 reinforcements in Hamburg are all pretending to be civilians, at that time, fewer people can be sent to defend the West. In this way, there will be more people on the front battlefield. At that time, if Marin fought to the death, he would face twice as many main enemy forces, and they were all elite. Even if he wanted to fight to the death, it might not be useful. In short, Marin threw out this seemingly perfect and reasonable fake plan in order to make the old fox Frederick III believe that this was true. Then, let them give up the key defense in the west so that the pressure on the real reinforcements would be reduced. At the same time, the spies originally densely distributed around Hamburg were deceived into the city of Hamburg by the recruitment of civilians and the capture of able-bodied men before Frederick III and Joachim I got this real intelligence. At this time, the real reinforcements landed at night and then went straight to the enemy camp and raided it. There was no reason not to win. And the role of the A-spy Jim was to deliberately be caught by the enemy with this double-layer parchment intelligence. Then, after being beaten, he pretended to rebel and instructed Frederick III and Joachim I to tear open the double-layer parchment to get the real information, and made them believe that this was real information. With this perfect and reasonable false information that Marin racked his brains to come up with, it seemed difficult for Frederick III and Joachim I to believe it. Chapter 449 The wind whistles and the Isue River is cold. In addition to this seemingly real false intelligence stuck between the two parchments, the upper parchment also wrote a more false intelligence. Its main content is, I heard that Hamburg secretly gathered 10,000 mercenaries, and asked Hamburg to send the 10,000 elite troops to the rear of the enemy when our army and the enemy are facing each other outside the city, and sneak attack the enemy. Obviously, according to the real intelligence below, this is to make the Bosse coalition believe that Hamburg really has hidden 10,000 troops. Then, when confronting Marin head-on, they had to divide their troops to the west to guard against possible surprise attacks by the Hamburg army. In this way, the Bosse coalition will lose at least 10,000 troops on the front battlefield. In this way, the pressure on Marin's 20,000 people will be much smaller, and there will be a chance to fight to the death. Otherwise, facing too many enemy troops, it may not be effective to fight to the death. Of course, this very false information may be believed by the young and impulsive Joachim I. However, the cunning Frederick III would definitely not believe it. Because German mercenaries are mainly concentrated in the southern part of Germany. The electorate of Saxony is located in the eastern part of southern Germany, very close to the southwest region where mercenaries are abundant. If Hamburg hired tens of thousands of mercenaries, the Saxons would not have known about it at all. Moreover, as the smartest of the 7 electors, Frederick III must have sent spies to Lübeck and Hamburg, 2 highly open commercial cities. As for East Frisia, Frederick III sent people to East Frisia in the team of his cousin, Duke George of Saxony. However, Marin's population management in East Frisia was very strict, and there were spies everywhere, which exposed them. However, because there were too many merchants coming and going in Lübeck and Hamburg, it was difficult to ensure that foreign spies would not be mixed in. Unless the 2 cities were closed for business. Therefore, Frederick III, who had sent spies in advance, would definitely doubt whether Hamburg had any troops. At that time, Jim, who was caught on purpose, would first be punished, and then pretend to be unable to bear the punishment, and instruct them to tear open the double-layer parchment to see the real intelligence. However, before Jim set off, Marin first sent someone to ask Grand Chancellor Heisenberg to start recruiting 10,000 civilians. In order to make the play realistic, according to Marin's suggestion, Grand Chancellor Heisenberg sent all the 500 light cavalry in Hamburg out of the city and blocked all roads leading to the east. Anyone who wanted to ride east on horseback would be intercepted. Anyone who wanted to force his way in would be killed. The reason for doing this was to show the attitude of, I want to keep it secret and I can't let the Bossa coalition know the truth. Then, send another troop to the villages near Hamburg to capture strong men. Doing this is to alert the snakes and alarm the scattered scouts outside Hamburg, so that they will be curious about what happened in Hamburg and want to enter the city to spy on the secrets. Although people were not allowed to leave Hamburg city on horseback at this time, people were not prohibited from entering. Even if spies from various countries who wanted to enter the city to gather intelligence knew about it, they would be welcome to enter the city. Anyway, there would be a curfew to restrict them later. At the same time, in Hamburg city, the Hamburg military would also order each family to send strong men to join the ranks of conscripts. The reason, of course, was to help defend the city. This reason was very reasonable. In this era, no matter which city was besieged, the strong men in the city would be forced to help defend the city. Those who were unwilling might be killed directly. Moreover, this was a routine, not tyranny. In difficult times, those strong women would even be pulled up to the city wall to help defend the city. Even if the women couldn't fight, they could still throw bricks and stones from the top of the city. Recruiting strong men in the city and capturing strong men outside the city, such a big movement, if it didn't attract scouts from various countries around Hamburg city, it would be strange. Especially the scouts from Brandenburg and Saxony, since it was a matter of great importance to the military, they would definitely sneak into the city to get information. As soon as these people entered the city, Hamburg would immediately implement the rule of only entering but not leaving to prevent those spies from leaving. Before that, people were only not allowed to ride horses out of the city. Those spies would definitely choose to leave their horses outside the city and walk into the city to get information. Then, after getting the information, they would go out of the city to find the hidden horses and go back to report. But the comprehensive rule of only entering but not leaving would trap those spies in Hamburg. Moreover, at this time, when Hamburg was recruiting civilians and conscripting men, the scouts under Saul had already gone to the riverside village a few kilometers north of Hamburg, and under the banner of Hamburg, began to temporarily take over all the horses in the village and began to strictly check outsiders. At the same time, those scouts would also drive the serfs in the manor to the Elbe River to build the proposed dock to facilitate the landing of the army. 3 days later, it was estimated that the scouts of the Bossa coalition near Hamburg were almost attracted to Hamburg's big move and entered the city of Hamburg. Marin officially sent Jim with a fake letter on double parchment. Before leaving, Marin gave Jim a small bag, which was full of makeup materials, such as foundation powder, eye pencil, various pigments, and false beards. The reason for giving Jim this set of things was to facilitate Jim's makeup when he escaped. Jim himself did not have much beard, and he did not plan to put on makeup when he met Frederick III and Joachim I this time. Because, if the makeup was too exaggerated and aroused Frederick III's suspicion, it would not be worth it. After all, he was an old fox. If his disguise was discovered, it would be very dangerous. However, when escaping from the barracks, Jim could disguise himself as another person, put on a big beard, change into the enemy's uniform, and take the opportunity to escape. Jim's skills are very good. As long as he puts on makeup, steals a set of other people's Bossa coalition uniforms in the barracks, and then relies on improvisation, he may be able to get out. Moreover, what makes Marin most relieved is that Jim has a burst of language talent and can speak the dialects of Saxony and Brandenburg. As long as he puts on makeup and steals the uniform, the chance of getting out is very high. After taking the makeup bag handed over by Marin, Jim finally felt much better. After all, Marin still cares about his life and death. However, when he was captured, the makeup bag was easily searched out. So Jim thought about it, split the materials in the makeup bag, and hid them in various places on his body, even in the saddle, to avoid being searched by the enemy. Then, Jim held the reins, clamped his feet on the horse's belly, and headed west without hesitation. "Oh, I hope you can come back alive." Looking at Jim's receding back, Marlin suddenly remembered a famous poem, "The wind is whistling and the Isue River is cold, the warrior will never come back once he leaves." However, the curtain of this decisive battle was truly opened with Jim's departure. Chapter 450, Battle. Shortly after watching Jim set off from the river bridge southwest of Lübeck, Marin immediately turned around and ordered, go, help me deliver a letter of war to the Bossa coalition camp. At this time, the last batch of camps of the Bossa coalition had just been dismantled, and they crossed the river to the west from the south of the city. In fact, in order to wait for Marin's army to chase out of the city, the Bossa coalition dragged its feet for a week before dismantling the camps. Moreover, the vanguard troops that first dismantled the camps and headed west were still far away from Hamburg at this time. Because Frederick III's original intention was not to attack Hamburg, but to wait for Marin's army to leave the city for a decisive battle. So, watching the large army leave, they actually haven't gone far. In the temporary camp between Lübeck and Hamburg, Joachim I took a sip of wine, and then said depressedly, "I'm really disappointed that the guy couldn't help but chase us out." Frederick III shook his head and said regretfully, "It seems that the other party may have seen that this is a trap. So, he probably plans to give up Hamburg and protect Lübeck. That doesn't matter, if we take Hamburg, we will make a fortune. After all, Hamburg's wealth is second only to Lübeck. Moreover, after taking Hamburg, no one will avenge them if we rob those Hanseatic merchants." "That's right. I estimate that if we loot Hamburg, we can get property worth millions of guldens, which will not only offset the cost of this expedition, but also make a fortune." This is so enjoyable." Joachim I laughed. "By the way, Joachim, you have to be careful when attacking the city. Let the Swiss do more in the early stage to consume Hamburg's strength. When the city is about to be broken, send our people to the front." "Ah. Why is that?" Joachim I was puzzled. "Stupid. In the late stage, our people are in the front. When the city is broken, should our army enter the city first?" "Ah. Yes, but so what?" "So what? If our army enters the city first, we can rush to the rich area and treasury of Hamburg in advance and control most of the property in our own hands. If the Swiss mercenaries rush in first, won't they rob the treasury and the rich area first? They are not our people, but if they rob the property, they can only give us half of it. How can this work? Hamburg's most valuable treasury and rich area must be robbed by our people. The Swiss are put in the back and can only rob the civilian area." After thinking about it, Joachim I looked at Frederick III with admiration and said, "Lord Frederick, you are really great." After saying that, he gave a thumbs up. Just when the two were discussing how to divide the wealth of Hamburg, a messenger suddenly came to report, "Two respected electors, there is an envoy from East Frisia outside the barracks. It is said that he is here to issue a declaration of war." "What?" Frederick III and Joachim I asked in surprise at the same time. But then, Frederick III laughed, "This is not bad." Marin finally couldn't help but jump out. "As long as we destroy the 20,000 troops and the four-way alliance, there will be no force that can stop us. By then, Lübeck and Hamburg will still be ours. Yes, we will divide it equally, and give some to the Swiss." Soon, Marin's messenger arrived at the big tent. Before entering the big tent, the messenger was touched all over, and even his boots were taken off for inspection to prevent him from bringing a dagger into the tent to assassinate the two electors. "Lord Marin, Duke of Schleswig, Count of East Frisia, Grand Lord of Munster and Osnabrück, ordered me to greet the two distinguished electors." Willy, one of Marin's guards, bowed to Frederick III and Joachim I. Although they were enemies, Frederick III and Joachim I's status as electors was indeed nobler than Marin's. Therefore, Marin's messenger Willy came over to greet them first. Frederick III snorted expressionlessly, then asked in a flat tone, "What's the matter with your visit, distinguished envoy? Tell us quickly, we are in a hurry to attack Hamburg." Looking at the pretentious Frederick III, Joachim I secretly gave him a thumbs up. "Ah." Willy pretended to be anxious according to Marin's prior instructions, and said, "Your Excellency the Elector Emperor, it's like this. My Lord Duke thinks that it is not a solution for both sides to continue to waste time like this. After all, the cost of tens of thousands of troops is too high. Therefore, the kind-hearted Lord Marin decided to fight a decisive battle with your army in the wild now, with the honor of knights, to decide the outcome as soon as possible." "TSK, with the honor of knights? I remember that your Duke." "Oh no, after this battle, he was still the Count of East Frisia." "Well, your Count, I remember, he is best at sneak attacks, right? You said he fought with the honor of knights, are you kidding me?" Frederick III sneered mercilessly. On the side, Joachim I laughed out loud, as if he had heard a very funny joke. Willy didn't know what to say for a moment, looking like a rookie. Finally, he respectfully put the parchment declaration of war in his hand on the ground and said, "Whether you believe it or not, this time our Lord is indeed going to fight your army to the death. The location is on the plain across the Trave River west of Lübeck. As for the time, it will be at 9 o'clock the day after tomorrow morning. You are going to fight outside the city? Still on the west side of the Trave River? Frederick III asked in surprise. Of course, on the plain on the west bank of the Trave River west of Lübeck. Did you lie to me? Frederick III still didn't quite believe this good thing. If Marin's 20,000 troops really crossed the Trave River, it would be difficult to retreat to the city of Lübeck on the east bank. After all, it was an army of 20,000. Even if they retreated, under the attack of the 50,000 Bossa coalition forces, it would be a blessing from God if they could withdraw a small half. And Marin's 20,000 men are unlikely to be the opponents of the 50,000 Bossa coalition forces. Are they here to die? Please rest assured, Your Excellency the two electors, our Duke has sworn on the Bible, and anyone who doesn't come is a grandson. Willie inadvertently imitated Marin's usual tone of voice. Okay, we will definitely arrive in time. Willie seemed to remember something and reminded again, Your Excellency the two electors, my Duke said that you must not go to the battlefield today and the day after tomorrow. If we find that your army has arrived at the battlefield when we cross the river, we will stop crossing the river and return to Lübeck. This is obviously because he is afraid that the Bossa coalition will take advantage of the army crossing the river to launch a sneak attack. Tisk, do you think everyone is like your master who loves to plot and attack, and likes to do such unnecessary things? We are real nobles and will never do such things. Frederick III said disdainfully. In fact, he also wanted to launch a sneak attack when Marin's army was crossing the river. However, in order to avoid scaring Marin's troops back, he did not intend to launch a sneak attack when the enemy was halfway across the river. Because the purpose of this decisive battle, the Bossa coalition, is mainly to destroy the living forces of the four-party alliance, not just to win. As long as Marin's 20,000 troops are all defeated on the west bank of the Trave River, Lübeck and Hamburg, in the eyes of the Bossa coalition, are almost undefended. If you really attack halfway across the river and scare half of the East Frisian army back, it would be really unprofitable. Because if these elite troops are guarding the easy-to-defend and difficult-to-attack city of Lübeck, it would be really troublesome. If all of them come to the plains on the west bank of the Trave River, it will be really beneficial to the Bossa coalition. At least, it is indeed the case on the surface.